right, and we are live. Thank you everyone for joining us. Welcome back to my channel. And this evening, I'm very excited for this chat. Ever since we set it up, I've just been giddy waiting to talk about this topic because I'm super passionate about it. And Vaughn, I know you're super passionate about it. So it's going to be a good time. So Vaughn, welcome to the channel for the first time. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thanks, Tori.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about who you are and what you write?
My name is Vaughn Roycroft. I write epic fantasy. It's kind of alt history epic fantasy. I have 2 published works, which are other side. Anyway, it's backward.
It's in there somewhere.
It's in there. There we go. The Severing Sun and Bold Ascension, and the 3rd book in that, it's a trilogy, is called Destiny's Doom, and it's coming soon. I'm just waiting on cover art for that. But
okay.
Yeah, so I've been working in this world and on this series for well over a decade. Actually, almost 2 now. But I've just been having a ball with it, and writing is pretty much my main thing now. I was in business years ago, and then I went on to sell my company. My wife and I sold our company, and I started a carpentry business, and she went into real estate. And then writing was a sideline that just kind of became a greater and greater. It just kind of took over. So
it does that.
Yeah. And she's still rocking and rolling and having a great time with real estate. Nice. And so she's very supportive, and I was able to devote more time to the gig that doesn't make any money.
You know, we're going to talk about that. Why do we do this?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, and for anybody who's watching, whether you're live with us or during the replay, down in the description box below, there's a link to Vaughn's website, so you can go and check out his Sundered Nation series. And it sounds like finishing up pretty soon. So let's start there. How does it feel to be at the end? I mean, you've spent so much time with these characters and in this world, and you're coming to the end, right, of the final book. Yeah. So what is that feeling like? Well,
it probably doesn't feel as monumental as it would for other writers who finish a trilogy, because I started this series with another trilogy in the same world. And how this all began with the Sundered Nation was I got finished with a draft and revised it many times of that first trilogy. And I actually got an agent with book 1 of that series. And that series is called The Legacy of Broken Oaths.
Ooh.
And so we were working along on that, and I was working with my agent as very much a teacher and very much helping me through the draft and revision. And we were doing a lot of work on book 1 and then in preparation for taking it to market. And I had been tinkering around with kind of a novella-sized story about this character from the Sundered Nation, Vaughn, who is of the Amalis. He's a chieftain who rises to power. And the first trilogy is about his children, primarily his 2 sons, but he also has a daughter. And it featured them very heavily and he's referenced in backstory constantly throughout it. And one of the things that happened was my agent said, "Have you ever written like Vaughn story?" And I was like, not really. And I have a lot of notes and a lot of non-linear stuff. And he goes, "I think it might help you to kind of make that into a linear story." And so while he was reading a draft of something I had just revised, I just started typing away, and it turned into, it just came gushing out of me.
Yeah.
And, so it turned into a single volume story that jumped in time quite a bit. And it was his entire life, but I finished it and sent him a copy of it, of the manuscript. And unbelievably for him, he was kind of slow to get back to me often. In about a week's time, he emailed me and he said, "Stop everything, work on this. This is the book we're going to
That's encouraging.
Yeah, I was pretty fired up about that one.
Yeah.
But this is in like, I think 2014.
Okay.
So I went to work on it. We made it a single volume thing and we tried to sell it, and it was just too big. It was too long. It was about 180,000 pages, I think, then, which is just too big for traditional publishers.
Sure.
And so then we were like discussing, he said, well, where would it fall into like a multi-volume thing? And I instantly knew the 3 chunks.
Yeah.
I instantly saw where it broke up. And I proposed what I was going to do to him, and he said, go to work. And so then we got through all that, and we took Severing Sun to market. And I think 2019, got close a couple times, but no cigar. And we just went to all the big hitters that we thought were going to take it. And it just felt like it was never going to happen. And I was getting a lot of feedback, like, can you cut down the number of characters and how many POVs you do? And can you make it a little shorter? And I was getting that kind of feedback. And I had been thinking a lot about self-publishing at that point. And so I pulled the trigger on that in 2020 and rewrote the books, all 3 of them at that point, to just do them the way that they were true to me. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like things that I'd been doing kind of that felt like they were for someone else. Yeah. I just went back to what felt really true to me. Yeah. And completed that draft and was like, how do I self-publish?
The massive learning curve that is self-publishing. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So, well, and I mean, how important is it for you as a writer to have that story be true to you? Because I know for me, that's one of the reasons why I've always kind of balked at the idea of trying anything in the traditional publishing market, because that I'm like, how would they change it? What would they want me to, how different would this story be on the other side? And not that those changes would always be a bad thing necessarily.
No,
but
not necessarily.
At some point that like that's so important for me as a writer that this is the story that came from my heart and soul, and it needs to be true to me as a writer. Yeah.
And I discovered how important it was to me in the process of this. Because I used to be, I wanted a traditional deal, and I was that was what I was working for. And working for it for so long, you kind of get on that, that hamster wheel of, oh, okay, I'll do that. Okay. I'll finish it, and you're
trying to please everyone.
Yeah. Yeah. And, and I always, all along the way, I thought, well, I don't want it. How am I going to market it if I publish it myself? I just want them to market it. I want it to be in bookstores. Right. And, over the years, all that stuff just gets less important. And you know what, to be honest with you, Tori, I care a lot less about my numbers because of what I went through to get here. Right. I think I learned that staying true to the story was more important to me. And if I get a bad review or if I get, somebody saying they really disliked something about the story, I'm like, well, I'm here because I did it exactly how I wanted to. Exactly. And it's just, and I'm a very low magic storyteller. And, I don't have any dragons or anything really flashy other than battles and stuff like that. I don't have a lot of.
I like those, so.
But I don't have a lot of,
I know what you mean.
Fireworks type of.
The spectacle of fantasy.
I'm more of a character-driven storyteller, and that's so I just don't really look at my numbers very much. And I don't think I'm doing poorly, but I don't think I'm doing as well as maybe I could have, but I don't care.
Yeah. Well, I think it's really important for us as authors when we come into this, you know, if somebody were to say, all right, Tori, I want to make a bunch of money, so I'm going to write a book. You know, most of us would say that's not, choose a different career path, right?
Yeah.
Because especially it's such a long game, and it's so, you know, even the big authors who have found a lot of success will talk about it's really a lottery system in a lot of ways. And kind of, you know, where are you at any given time, and something might take off, but you're not guaranteed. And so when you have something like that, I think the being true to yourself and writing something that you really are proud of and love is the most important, because maybe it takes off someday and it's wildly successful. But if it's a slower start and it's not, you know, like you said, the numbers aren't maybe what some people would like them to be, why are you doing it? Right. Is it, you know, what is it giving you as the writer? Because I think that's incredibly important.
Yeah, and the connections that you do make when somebody clearly gets it and connects with it, then it's all worth it. I mean, it's just all of a sudden you're like, that's why I do this. And you know, it's been a great journey in that respect. And you know, I see a lot of the other side of it, and I know I'm good friends because of Writer Unboxed. I've been an associate editor at Writer Unboxed for about 10 years. I think, well, I was a contributor before I was an associate editor, and I come into contact with some really successful writers, and get to know them, and I've gotten to a lot of them I can call friends, and they have their issues and problems too.
Absolutely.
And like you said, it is a numbers game, and if you don't get the shelf space at Barnes and Noble on week 1 and the news section, and if you don't get face outs, or your cover isn't quite what you wanted, or you know, I've got dear friends who have had 3-book deals that the second 2 books have been canceled out because they didn't sell. You know, you got to sell through. Everything they print has to sell.
Right.
And you know, it's not all, you know, there's good and bad on every angle to publishing. And you know, and success, like you said, if you're chasing sales, good luck to you, because you know, trends and stuff are, by the time you jump on a trend and get a book done,
it's over.
It's over.
Yeah.
Romantasy writers who are thinking about starting now, too late. No, I shouldn't say that. If that's really want to write that, but
yeah. I think that one's going to stick. Because, well, I think it's interesting, just very brief side tangent. I think it's interesting because, like, to me, romantasy is kind of a extension of a lot of the YA fantasy romance that has been, and I think it's just kind of slowly integrated itself into adult fantasy as well.
Absolutely.
But yeah, like you said, the trends change so quickly, and even within those subgenres, the trends change very quickly. You know, what kind of characters are people looking for? What kind of storylines? So at the end of the day, you know, it's important for us to have something that we're proud of, because you never know. It may hit a trend, it might not, but at the end of the day, it's you and your story. And like, you know, that's an incredible accomplishment for anybody, first of all, to finish a book.
Yeah, right.
Because how many people have we talked to, right? Oh, I'd love to write a novel someday.
Or people that, well, I started one.
Yeah. It's a huge accomplishment to actually finish.
To get to the end. And and you know, I think there's so much to finishing that first thing. I think there's a Neil Gaiman quote about that.
Probably.
But I think the power of finishing or something is like a nice little quote about it. But you gain so much even with something that you know isn't, you know, ready for prime time. You know you can finish.
Right.
And then you can always go back. I mean, the workout afterward, what you don't realize, what I didn't realize when I first started writing was writing a draft is the very beginning.
Oh yeah. That's the, well, I don't know how to say that's the easy part. I find the first draft really difficult. And
Yeah.
I don't know if you do, but, and I think part of it was we were talking about before we went live, is that there are so many authors, and I admire the skill, who are able to write and just turn off that inner editor and just write a draft, and they don't care what it looks like, and they just want to get the words down on paper and move on to the editing phases.
Right.
So they move through it a lot faster usually than people like you and I, who were sitting there, we write a paragraph and then we stop and we look at it for a while and we go back and we change a few things and okay, now I can move on.
I can't do the fast drafting thing. No. And I think process is like going to be like a fingerprint. We're all going to have a different one. It's all going to be slightly different. But what you find are the little things that work for you. And for me, like, for example, and I told you this before we started too, is that I read the prior day's work to get myself rolling on the current day. Yeah. But another thing that I do every single day when I'm done writing is I get right up and I walk. The dog and I get right out in nature, and my head's just, even if I say I'm not going to think about it, or if I'm pissed off or whatever, I'm reworking it, and I always come back, and I always have a little card that is there for the next day. And quite often it's I'm a character person, so snippets of dialogue is a big thing for me. I'll think of something someone would have said, or just the way they would have said it, and then I come right back and I write that down, and then I can forget about it for the night. After that, the walk and the notes and the shower, and maybe a few more notes after shower, but then it's dinner and no more writing. But it's everybody's got a different thing, and you got to just find yours. It took me years to find mine. Same. Yeah, I feel like it's a lifelong learning curve too, because I've found that with every book, the process changes ever so slightly, right? Because you get, it's like, and I don't know if you have any and how many children you have. None. We have 3. And one of the things that I kind of associate it with a lot is you have your first child. You're like, okay, I've got this parenting thing down, right? And then you have your second child, and all of a sudden you have to completely like reconfigure parenting to a new, unique individual, and things change. Like that foundation is there, but a lot of the logistics change, and how that child learns and all of that kind of stuff is like learning a completely new process. I thought it was really funny too, because when you were talking about how you started the Sundered Nation trilogy, it kind of made me chuckle, because I think we're doppelgangers in some ways, because I started a series called Edge of the Earth when I was in college. And I saw that article you posted. Really cool. And I got to a couple years ago, I was like, all right, I'm ready to write my epic fantasy. I feel like I'm at a point now where I can handle something that's a little bit, bigger like that. And I started doing some backstory, as you do. And all of a sudden I was like, man, what'd be really interesting is if I told a story that was like half a generation prior to this. Oh, wow. Cool. And just tell a little bit of like I've always been really fascinated by the idea of how historical heroes are kind of deified through history, and they become inhuman in a lot of ways as we remember them. We have names like Achilles. Well, he was a little boy toddling around after his mother at one point, but we've kind of forgotten that part, and so I wanted to kind of go back and, okay, the legends from Edge of the Earth, who were they when we started with them? Where do we start with that? And that was kind of this is truly amazing, because so Veldon in my first series he's deceased. Sure. Sons are there, and one in each world, in the Roman world and the Gothic world. And so depending on who you were and what group you were with and so on and so forth, Valdin was either a legend or a villain. Remembered as the worst thing that ever happened to us, or the greatest hero that ever lived. I kept coming up against that dichotomy, and like, well, how did this happen? Like, I need to tell this story. Of he became, either a hero or a villain. And that's exactly what I set out to do. And so it's always, I think it's a lot of people who have read book 2 and been a little taken aback at some of the villainous things that my protagonist has done. They it's so natural for me. It was the core of the whole thing was to figure out how this happened,
because you already saw him as the two sides of how does he appear.
So getting to the core of that, and I think so in a lot of ways that people, even if they dislike that a little bit, I'm like, just hang in there, or whatever,
trust me.
And I kind of like it. I like that people are like, oh, he's just an asshole. And I'm like, yeah.
Well, it's really funny because one of my characters in the Bloodstones, Sindri, she's a warrior, and when I started her character, I had found myself in a place where I was really tired of the strong female character trademark, female characters in fantasy. And I wanted to subvert that with Sindri. And so she is, built like a tank. She's an incredibly fierce warrior. And she's also very weak in a lot of areas. And she leans on the people around her. She's reckless. She's impulsive. She makes some decisions in the story where my readers are like, And I've been loving.
Are you telling me she's human?
I know, right? Weird, like layered. I don't know. And I have it's been secretly validating to watch the reviews come out where, like, there'll be one review where, oh, I loved Sindri's character. She was my favorite character. And then the next review is like, I hated Sindri. I don't even know why she's in the book. And I'm like, yes, it's working. Because it's meant to be that kind of dichotomy of like, how do we feel about her? I don't know.
If they're complex, there's going to be things you love and hate about them. And I like complex characters. I want to write complex characters. I like reading them. I like to be made slightly uncomfortable sometimes while I'm reading.
So what for you, as you're, working on a character or you're reading and thinking through that, what do you think for you defines a complex character?
It's all of us have so much inside of us, and we present a certain number of our facets to the world, but so many of them we try to keep veiled. And I try to do that with characters too. I mean, they're carrying a lot inside. I don't want to get bogged down with interiority as far as narrative goes, but I always try to build in, inner conflicts that quite often, an outer conflict is because of, in some part, an inner conflict that's going on that's being veiled, or, one of the things that my agent teaches is third level emotions. Have you heard about?
I've heard the term before, but I'm not sure. Super familiar with it.
He's actually written a couple of books about it. It's the emotional craft.
Yes, I have that on my wish list.
It's a great book, but that's third level emotions is in there. But I just thought of it because of what we're talking about is, like, for example, in just a situation, say two sisters, one gains some achievement, they're close, and the other sister's reaction, her first reaction would be, oh my God, I'm so proud of you, this is so great, joy. The second reaction might be something like, well, this opportunity is going to take you away from me, sadness, sorrow. But what's the third level emotion is envy, resentment. that's the one that's
one.
That's the one that's gonna be kept inside. It's gonna grow and fester and cause their relation. It's gonna cause behavioral things. It's gonna cause their relationship to change course, or it's just, those are the things that I consider to be a complex character, is when we gain an insight into that. And it doesn't, and this is a big part of show don't tell, like all of a sudden their behavior is tipping off that, oh, she's pissed, isn't she?
There's some green-eyed monster there.
Yeah, I mean, and you don't want to have an interior moment where it's like, actually, I'm jealous, because you won't even admit that to yourself often, it'll alter the way you behave, that because we're human. I mean, so, I mean, that's just an example, but yeah, that's the kind of thing that I like to see on the page, and I like to experience it over time, and find it myself, that's when it means something to me.
Yeah.
As a reader.
Yeah. Well, and I think it comes off the page because you can tell that the author knows that character to that many layers deep, right? Where they're able to bring out those more subtle, nuanced sort of actions or little phrases that kind of tip you off, and oh, something's off here. What's off? Especially when you have them, one of the benefits I think in our genre is because we spend so many pages oftentimes with these characters, we really as authors have the opportunity to pack in so much layer over time with those characters, and show as they stubbornly hang on to facets of themselves, or as they grow and change, and how that affects the sociology of the world around them. And
it even starts infecting the world building in a lot of ways. It's been I've been amazed by getting to know characters like that. And you kind of subtitled this Beyond the Word Count, and it's something that because I've lived with these manuscripts for so many years, and these characters really, and even before I started the Sundered Nation, I knew a lot of these characters, and I knew the world really well. And I think that was a huge benefit. Yeah. And I'm not saying everybody can spend almost 20 years working on a series. I know that's not practical, and it's just not typical. But the more you can kind of sit with a book, even a finished draft, and like, I found that I do a lot of just thinking and taking notes, and more than I used to. A lot. I used to just think, it'll come to me as I go, and I was a pantser, so I just sit and type, and thousands of words, and a 3,000 to 5,000 a day was not that uncommon for me, but I ended up pitching most of it. So in the end, I'm like, I did learn my way to here. Like, for example, I'm working on book 4, which was originally book 1.
Yeah.
And now it's going to be a linear story for readers if they continue with me. But I just decided, rather than revisit or go back to the Word doc and just like try and rework it, and because so much has changed over the evolution of writing the Sundered Nation, I just said, I pitched it all. I haven't even looked at those documents at all. And so I opened a new doc, and I started all over again. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. Now, how does this open? Because the opening was always tricky, because when you're trying to tell in traditional, you really got to get it right. And I rewrote it so many times. I can't even tell you how many times I rewrote this opening. And so I'm like, throw it all out. Don't even think about it. Just how would this open? And I thought of 2 characters that could meet, and for a reason, and then their meeting would be in response to the inciting incident of the story. So they're people that wouldn't have met in the old version of the book for half the book. Right. But now I know they would do this. And I was thinking about this meeting and how this prologue might go, and I haven't written it yet. And this has been going on for over a week since I had this epiphany. And I was thinking about it from one of the characters' POVs, because she's my favorite, over and over and over again. I'm laying in bed thinking about it. It's kind of like my self-soothing thing to go to sleep and all that, you know. And I'm thinking what would be included in the series, and I have like notes.
Oh yeah.
And you know, so I'm like, something's not quite right about this, and I just said yesterday to myself, what am I not thinking of here? What if it's from the other character's POV?
Yeah.
Now I thought of so many great aspects to that, and I haven't written as much from that character's POV.
Sure.
But I thought of so many things that would come to light through doing it that way, and it was because I spent a week thinking about it, which I know not everybody can do that, and because I'm working on book 3 stuff, I don't really have a lot of time to, you know, to just sit and write. And there's a lot going on right now, and we've been on vacation, and anyway, it's nice to have some time and space, just to have some deep thought about important moments in your book, and how things tie back together, and how this, you know, what could have changed about this. Oh, if I do this, but now I got to change all these things, you know, like, so you gotta, I tried to advise people in the essay I wrote, that you, and I think that kind of triggered all this, didn't it? But I was trying to advise younger people in particular. I remember just wanting to rush through and get that draft done and get it submitted. And I'm just saying, take a breath, you know, just think about it, think about the book, and get some feedback on it, you know, even if it's just other readers, not necessarily other writers, or, you know, beta readers, whatever you can find. If you can hire help, do that.
Right.
Anyway.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I feel like this year for me as a writer has been a lot of leaning into that kind of a mindset, because, you know, coming off of the launch of Bloodstones last November, there's that momentum, right? And we talked a little bit in our Twitter DMs about kind of that hustle kind of culture where you get kind of swept off in this current of, oh, I got to get the next book out, and I gotta write and word count, right?
And everybody's excited about it, so they're feeding that.
And I'm excited, and they're excited, and it's great. And there were so many, I think the world just kind of forced me to slow down this year, because there were a lot of things going on in my personal life, and my kids are getting a little bit older now, so they are a lot busier. And so I'm, you know, taking them to activities, and by the time I get home, there's a lot of just brain fog, and I'm tired and done for the day. And at first, most of this summer, I just spent really frustrated, and I'd get to my manuscript and I was already like in that kind of frustrated mindset. And I've really started taking a step back and saying, okay, but in the last 3 weeks, when you haven't written a word on the actual manuscript, this fell into place. You spent some time thinking about this character's motives. You figured out like an entire murder mystery that was kind of important to the story. Like,
important.
It's very important. So yeah, I mean, I think oftentimes, and this is kind of what spurred our discussion in general, was that beyond the word count, I feel like word count has become such a like celebrated aspect of the writing process. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think, you know, for a lot of people, it's very helpful to have those word count goals. And, you know, I like to hit the milestones. I just posted today, I hit 50,000 on my current project, which is really exciting. But I think learning as part of the craft to honor the quieter parts of the writing process, like we were talking about, where you go for a walk and you just let your brain relax and work, because then, like, staring at the screen and typing, in my opinion, is like the less creative part of the creative process, right? You're just filtering information that your brain has been slowly building in the background, and now you have to get it on the page.
Yeah.
And it's all of that work where the story is allowed to blossom and unfold, which if you're frustrated and you're focused on word count, it just kind of, closes up, and it's harder to relax into that creative process.
I had a teacher once, someone that spoke to us several times at Radar on Box. Meg Rostoff is her name. She's a novelist. She's British. She came to our conference a couple times and talked to us, but she talks about how much of the process or the story is coming from your subconscious, and how your consciousness is a regulation point. It's like, and she said, there's just so much that wants to flow out, and you're restricting it with your consciousness, and you need to find ways to open that up and let it flow.
Yeah.
And she said, and really quite often your consciousness becomes like a colander, and it wants to trap some of the stuff that you're rejecting it. No, this is bad stuff. You got, and it's like, well, let it all flow in there and just see what your subconscious is trying to tell you. Because like you said, on the walks and stuff, your brain's still working.
Yes. Even
when you're not consciously trying to put puzzle pieces together, your brain is. I mean, trust me, it really is.
Oh, yeah.
And you just said you solved a murder mystery without sitting down and writing. I mean, that's a perfect example of what I'm talking about. So I truly believe in that too. I'm a big believer in, and that's evolved for me. And like I said, I used to be a word count guy, and I used to be even a post my word count guy very routinely. I got 5,000 words today, and it's like a humble brag, but and
I mean, that's an impressive day.
Yeah, and everybody pats you on the back, and it is impressive. But like I said, for me, that really wasn't working, and I ended up tossing so much of that. So deeper thought, more time, figure, and my building block now, when I discarded word count and I barely look at it or even know about it, I work in scenes now. Scenes are my building blocks, and everything's about the scene, and it doesn't need to get done in one day, and quite often usually doesn't, but I know what progress is. I know because of scene work. And I have if I don't have anything else about the scene, I have POV's goal, motivation, conflict, and then crisis or segue. So at the end of the scene, how does this lead to more story? Right. And that's how I build my drafts now, my first drafts, and everything kind of can get fuzzy. I mean, goals can be fuzzy, and motivations can change, and there can be dual motivations, but if you have just those
starting point,
basic elements to start, who else is in the scene? What are they perceiving from this? And you just
Well, and I think that flexibility is so important regardless of what your process is, because I've always kind of famously been a gardener or pantser for most of my writing life. And for some books, that works really well for me. When I wrote Phased, which is my paranormal fantasy, it just came out scene after scene after scene. I didn't outline a shred of it, and it just flowed beautifully. But that's a much more contained, setting. You've got a smaller cast, and the motives are very personal, right? We're not dealing with nations. And then when I started working on Bloodstones, I found that I would discovery write for a while, and then I had to kind of hit a block, and then maybe map out the next few scenes to get myself going again. So it was like a kind of quasi planning. And now with Queen's Wolf, I finally hit a point where I was like, okay, I need to outline this, because this is so big. It's too much to all store in my head at this point. And so I started working on laying out just character, scene, character POV, scene, just to have something to kind of show me where I was going next.
Sure.
Because there's, as you know, I mean, writing an epic fantasy with multiple POVs, there's so many threads. There's so many threads to remember and keep track of, that for me, it just got like, I'd sit down to write a scene and I was like, what is happening?
Yeah. And what else is happening elsewhere?
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And how do those things tie in? And remembering that, 20 chapters down the line, something needs to happen here that's going to, catalyst us to that point or to the ending or whatever it is. And so I've really tried to kind of embrace more of a planner kind of approach to this book.
Do you always know the end though, even when
yes.
Yeah.
Yes, 100%. Yeah. And usually when I start the book, I have the ending in mind. And I've always been the type of reader that moves between emotional beats of the story. So the big emotional impact moments within the story. And then I kind of try to figure out how they are all connected and how we get to that end point. And that's how I read too. I really like those moments of emotional impact where if the author has, immersed me really heavily into this character's life, I can feel it coming. And that's that emotional, hit that I love so much.
Yeah. Keeps you turning pages too.
It does. Yeah. Because you care so much about what the next moment's going to bring.
Right.
So yeah, I've really tried to embrace, flexibly the outlining method and just see how that helps me kind of stay on track a little bit more with Queen's Wolf. And it's kind of a relief because there's so much just kind of all stuck in my head.
Yeah.
That one of my goals this last weekend was, like you, I have notebooks everywhere and I have notes on my phone and I have Microsoft Word documents because when it hits you, you just want to get it out.
Gotta get it out.
So one of my goals this last weekend was I have my outline in Excel and I opened a new tab and I just did, okay, we're going to combine all of my notes from all of these different places so that I have them all in one spot. So I don't have to go, which notebook was that in again? Yeah. I don't know about for you, so it sounds like most of yours, like, as you're falling asleep and during the day on your walk. For me, it's always when I'm half asleep.
Oh.
Always. Or I'm driving. Those are like the two.
That's opening of the subconscious thing, right? Like Meg Rostov's talking about.
Yeah. So I have two notebooks sitting right by my bed with a pencil because I'll be half asleep and all of a sudden a scene will just fully fledged come into my head.
Wow, that's great.
That I've been stuck on for weeks. And I'll, okay, hold on.
Well, here's the next question. Can you read your own writing the next day?
Yes.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah, I also have a lamp next to my bed, and my husband is very patient and sleeps heavily. So, yeah, but I found that to be really helpful. So I think having that kind of flexibility, because I think a lot of new writers come in and look for the writing process, right? And there's going to be one that works best for them for this book. But I think having that flexibility of realizing, listen to what a lot of people do, try some of your own things, take the pieces that are helpful and kind of implement and see what works for you, because it's usually kind of a jury-rigged version.
It's always going to be a combination. And there are pure plotters. Absolutely. I know a lot of them.
Oh, yeah, I do too.
Pure plotters and like detailed plots that are very well outlined. It's just not for me. I can't do it. It sucks all the joy out of it for me, for one. But because discovery, like you said, is part of it. It's the gardening and So, but what was I going to say about that? Oh, there are elements of plotting that I do, and now I've had the luxury with these 6 books of, I know the books, I know the story, I know the endings, and I've been working on these books for so long, and now I've got 3 more books that I've got to get out that I absolutely know how they end and basically how they're structured. But I know that there are going to be ways that that the story is going to come together more effectively, and I'm going to need to do some plotting, some working out, okay, this scene, these guys are over here doing this. Because, and I did very much so with that first series, bite off way more than I could chew, because I was doing 2 worlds. These brothers lived, one in the Roman world and one in the Gothic world.
Yeah.
And it was, I did all this research on Rome and all this research on the Goths. And then I was writing basically 2 huge books and trying to combine them. And actually, one of my very first hired editors was, she came from the romance world. Kathy Yardley is her name, and she's a phenomenal editor and a great teacher, developmental editor. But I hired her, and she's like, I think you got to break this into 2 books. And I really didn't want to do that, but I did.
Yeah.
And I broke it into 2 books, and I hated it. My wife hated it. And, and she's my ideal reader. And so when we put it back together, I had 2 linear narratives that I could see the places that they would splice together better to be more impactful.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, pulling the story apart and putting it back together. And
Yep.
I know now that I'm going to have to do a lot more of that to make it all work with what I've already written, because I've changed, not dramatically, but I've changed a lot of things about what's happened here. So, it's going to be an interesting process, but I'm going to incorporate those elements of plotting or planning.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so everybody's got a hybrid, was my point.
Right.
You're all going to have some degree of, and my first draft of my first story was utterly just pantsing with no idea where I was going. And that led nowhere.
Right.
So you got to have some idea where you're
going. Yeah.
Where you're going. I think, in my opinion, most people do.
Well, and I think even if you come into a story like not knowing where you're going, part of your subconscious knows, it's in there. You just got to find it. And
that's what
I think,
gets you sitting down at the page. You're trying to figure it out yourself.
Where is this going?
Yeah.
I wanted to really quickly shout out a couple of people in the chat. Daniel says he's very excited for your book 3.
Oh, cool. Thanks, Daniel.
Britton. Hi, John. I know Britton had to leave a little bit ago. Hi, Tim.
Hey, Tim.
And I have 3 kids too. I also love to write. Yeah, it's very different with each kid and with each book.
Oh my God. And I have so much respect for parents who are writing. I don't even know how you guys do it.
It keeps me out of trouble, Vaughn, is the truth of it. It's one of those things where, like, I think it's very easy for, as a parent to completely embody the identity of parent, right? And I think for me, it's been very important because I'm a better person, friend, wife, mother, anything, when I have that creative time to pour into a project that's just my own. And for my kids to be able to see me pursuing a passion, and that's important to me, so that someday when they have those passions, they'll feel like they're confident to pursue them as well. Yeah. And that's important. So I think
that's really cool.
Yeah, like Phased, my children were quite a bit younger. I was writing that one, I wrote in 2019 and 2020. And I was sitting at the dining room table, and there were toys being thrown over my head and kids screaming. And I don't know. Looking back, how did I do that? I don't know. I have no idea. Laura says hi. And then Jared came in and said also, so much looking forward to book 3. Got some fans in the chat.
Yeah. Thanks, Jared. I can't wait to get it to you.
Derry is awake. Hi, Derry.
Hi, Derry.
And speaking of prolific authors, hi, Janny.
No kidding. Yeah.
I've learned a lot. I've learned so much talking to all of the authors I've talked to, but especially, Janny's a fount of wisdom.
I've noticed. But I also know I need to read her, so that is.
I do too.
You were absolutely on my TBR, Janny.
Have you read anything by her yet?
No, not yet.
I started with, she has the standalone To Ride Hell's Chasm. And I think from my experience, that was an excellent kind of gateway into her work, because it gives you an idea of that kind of rich prose, but also it's the standalone. So you kind of get that like condensed taste test of it.
You recommend starting there?
Well, Janny's in the chat, so she is more than welcome to disagree with me because they're her books. But yeah, I think it's a great starting point.
Wise.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Definitely will do.
Yeah. I was looking at my thing here. We talked a little bit about writing being an art form. And I don't know about you, but I consider myself a writer, obviously, but I also consider myself an artist. And I think for me, that's been a really important aspect of loving what I do, no matter what the numbers are, or no matter what, it ends up doing in the external sphere. Because art is we talk about this all the time, right? As artists, we put something very vulnerable and very personal on a page, and then we kind of put it on a silver platter and put it in front of a giant crowd of critics. And, because even the average reader has opinions about the book, right? And which, as they should. So it's, as that very vulnerable art form, I think that's the power that writing has to connect author and reader and readers together. But do you see it as being an art form, and how important is it for you to see it that way?
It's become very important to me. And I do. I think I had to learn that. And I think I also had to learn, part of the whole accepting that that this is the artist's life is understanding that there are no goal lines, really. I mean, getting a book done, getting a book published, all those things, those are milestones. They're not goal lines. I mean, you have to have goals, but it's about the daily practice of it, and living the artist's life, I think, is embodying the fact that and it's such a cliche, and I hate to say it, but it really is it's a journey. I mean, it is. Yeah. You have to accept that you're on a journey. And as I've gotten older, I mean, I started, and you started very young, but I did not. I spent 25 years thinking one of these days I'm going to write, like we were talking about.
And you did.
And I did. To my credit, I got to pat myself on the back. I started when I was 43, and there were incidents in my life that kind of gave me the nudge. We lost my mother-in-law in particular was a tough one.
I'm sorry.
And, but it's nice that she always was part of my reading journey, and we shared books and we talked about that sort of thing. And she knew I loved Lord of the Rings, and she made like the Lord of the Rings movie releases into like a family holiday tradition for our extended family. Everybody went, whether they wanted to or not.
It's good for them.
Yeah, right.
Culture.
So, and that was just when she and I talked a lot about one of these days I'm going to write, and she was an avid reader, and one of the things that happened when she passed was I said, if I'm going to do this, I got to do it sometime. I actually sit down and start. And so I credit her in a lot of ways, but in the beginning, it was just like, well, I just want to get a draft done. And I was actually thinking, well, maybe, no one will read it, but my nieces and nephews or something. And but then it turned into an adult book, so that one. But things just started happening, and I thought, well, I just got to get it done. And then after I got a draft done, the goal line that I thought I had was I just got to get it published. First it was I just got to get an agent, and then once I got an agent, we just got to get it published. And then when all that kind of, I don't know, I don't want to say blew up, but I just kind of like something hit me, and I was just like, am I really gonna jump through a bunch of hoops just to get it published, like we talked about earlier? And then I realized, well, how important is that? Like even getting it published is really, I just know this is my life now. And I'm my best version of myself when I'm working on writing every day. And that's what feeds my soul and makes me happy. So I needed to put that as the number one thing. And then publishing and the rest of it is like gravy now to me.
Yeah.
After accepting that, like getting somebody who really connects with the work, like Daniel, he was just one of those guys that just, obviously gets it.
Yeah. The super fans.
Yeah. And then you're just like, oh, yeah,
it's a great feeling.
But it's like I said, that's just like supplemental to, I know the rest of it is giving me joy. It's what I'm meant to be doing. I feel like this is my work, Yeah. And, so, yeah, I guess it's an acceptance of the artist's life is acceptance is the key word there. You just kind of got to realize it's doing the work is the important part of that equation. For me, anyway, that's what I've kind of come to realize. And I'm not saying I don't have my days where I'm like, oh, geez, why, I just want to get to here. I just want to get this book out. I just want, why can't I get a decent review? I have my days. Of
course, we all do.
Yeah. So, but then I remember and I go back to, but I get to sit here and write every day.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, and that was going to be my next question is so my very good friend and fellow fantasy author, Andrew Meredith, he is planner extraordinaire. Like he plans like moon phases out in his world. Wow. And like, I mean, it's like,
That's impressive.
I'm so impressed and I'm just like, I could never, I'm impressed. But we have kind of this agreement where every great once in a while, if either of us has what we call a quit day, we just message each other and I'm having a quit day. I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore. Like it's just, whatever triggers it. And we have our quit day and then we move on, And my question for you was, what is it that keeps you going on those harder days and how do you jump back into the writing process?
I've gotten to the point where I'm willing to, when I feel like quitting, I know I'm not really, because I said I was going to quit so many times.
Right.
And I can't quit.
And we're still here. It's because
we are.
I mean, it just, if we close the gates, the dam would break through and flood everything. So we can't.
I've gotten to the point in my life and I'm 63 years old now. And I just feel like I can take a week or two, just do no writing. And I used to not be able to like do that. I felt like a strong sense of, internal pressure that I had to release somehow. And I don't have that so much anymore. And I think having published the first trilogy, well, almost all three now, has kind of taken some of that internal pressure off. But I do, and my wife's gotten to the point where she's been able to take some more time off, and she has an assistant now who does a lot of stuff for her. And we when we decide on a Tuesday we want to get in the car and go rent an Airbnb somewhere, we do it. And and I don't have to write tomorrow. I mean, I can take notes or I can write on the road. I really don't very often, but I can. And quite often what that turns into is more thinking time because we end up going somewhere that's beautiful or something. And I'm staring at water or something. And I'm like, so that to me is working. It's writing. So since I've kind of accepted that I'm living the artist's life and let go of the internal pressure of having to be typing, I think, it keeps me coming back because I know even when I know I can be gone for even a full week of not even thinking about it or typing at all, and that it's one of these days, something's going to hit me and go, you know what you need for that scene or like this epiphany I just had for this prologue for book 4. It just kind of hit me out of the blue, and it's like, oh, now I'm like, I can't wait to get to it. And it's almost like putting it off in a way to kind of keep the excitement of it.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, it brings me back again and again, and I can't imagine myself without it now.
Yeah.
So it's just a huge part of my life, and people all of my friends that I see in person, not online, but in person and stuff, they all just know and respect my afternoons and my writing time. From lunch to 4-ish. And nobody bothers me during that time. Everybody leaves me alone.
Sounds amazing. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, that's why I said I can't even imagine doing this as a parent. So I just have no concept of how hard that must be. But I know
you adjust. Yeah, you adjust. I mean, one of the skills that I've learned is how to kind of focus in on writing, even if there's chaos going on around me, and amazing. Kind of split the attention just so there's just a tiny, I keep one ear just in case something really bad happens, that I'm there. But for the most part, my kids are old enough now that they can independently, do their own thing and play or do their schoolwork or whatever. And so it's a skill set born out of necessity, I think. Yeah.
I got to tell you, my editor at Writer Unboxed has also been she's a great friend and a developmental editor for me too, Therese Walsh. He wrote her 2 novels that are great books and published, but she wrote them when her children were young. And you reminded me of this, but her son, her youngest of 2, he just he's like went to USC Film School. He's written these shorts that have won all these awards, and he's just getting ready to. He did a Kickstarter for a short film that he's about to do. He just made his Kickstarter. I saw it right before I sat down here that they just made their goal for their Kickstarter.
Oh, awesome! Congratulations to them.
I mean, you said something about I want them to see that they can do that. Oh my God, did that happen with her kids? They're both fantastic young adults now that I just think they're the greatest people in the world. And her husband's a playwright and she's a novelist. And what you're telling me is like, yes, this does happen quite often, I think. And that example is going to be huge in their lives. So I just want to throw that out there.
I hope so. Well, and it's been really cute because, my youngest is 7 now and my oldest is just about to turn 12. And they've all already they do a lot of imagination play and they're telling these big stories. And, my son's the oldest, so there's always pirates and shipwrecks and, all the battles and whatever. And, and it just makes me so happy every time I walk by one of their rooms and I hear them and they're telling this big, story with all these characters. I love that they're having the chance to grow up with that's just normal,
Had to fill your heart rate up though. I mean,
it does.
Wow.
Yeah. It's pretty cool. Yeah. So one of the things that I talk about quite lengthily on my channel and have done the show about it was imposter syndrome. And that's something we talk about. I've probably had more conversations with other writers about imposter syndrome than any other topic in writing, because all of us have it. And I'm always curious with the author guests that I bring on my channel to talk about, imposter syndrome and do you deal with it? How do you stuff it back in the box? Do you stuff it back in the box? Like, does it creatively drive you? How does that fit into your writer life?
It used to be, a major issue for me. In fact, I think a lot of people in my life were astounded to find out that I'd been writing for many years because I just didn't ever talk about it. I hid it, and I was a carpenter too. And I when I was doing that other work, it was easy enough to hide the fact that I was writing every chance I got.
Yeah.
But once I started to share manuscripts, and then I would tell just a few people, and then they would tell other people, and then people would be like, "You're a writer?" And like, I mean, this went on for years. So
yeah,
and it was always just like, I don't want to talk about that. And then, heaven forbid, someone like bring it up at a dinner party or something, and everybody looks at you, and you're like, "Oh my God!" So yeah. I know you started a lot younger than I did, and it was just, I think it was just a little more shocking for this 40-something guy to, all of a sudden be a writer that people had known for years.
Yeah.
But I really struggled with it, and I just thought, and because my storytelling is not very conventional and not very magic based and stuff, I never felt like I fit into the fantasy world very well. When I was being shopped with the traditional publishers with Don, I mean, he always reassured me, "Oh no, you're fantasy, and I'm like, and then editors would be like, "Well, I'm looking for something with a little more of fantastical elements and that sort of thing." So that would just like, oh my God. Nobody wants to read this stuff. I don't fit in anywhere. I don't, how am I ever going to sell a single book? And, and then just over time, you just let a lot of that go, I think.
Yeah.
And once I accepted, and like, it ties back to what we've been talking about, being happy about being able to be true to what you want to, the story you want to tell. And just kind of letting go of the rest and living the artist life. All this ties back to being a great way to fight imposter syndrome. And I have been lucky, and Writer Unboxed has been a huge part of this, but I've been lucky to be able to sit around with some really big names and just have dinner with people and drinks and talk to them, and everybody's so nice. And then like, I remember the first time I had dinner with a bunch of published novelists, I was just like, please, nobody ask me anything, I don't even want to talk about what I write, or I don't want to talk about any of this stuff. And then when people would like encourage you and just like be really interested when you did something, you're just like, oh, maybe I do have something interesting to say. You just kind of, it took years. For me, years. But I was lucky.
I think it's maybe we kind of had the shocking experience maybe on the opposite ends of the spectrum, because one of the things that I went through, and I've talked about this on a few live streams before, but starting as young as I did, especially back when self-publishing was still kind of in the dark ages. It was like, people making their covers in Microsoft Word with clip art and, that kind of stuff. And because I was as young as I was, a lot of people, we had people who were convinced that my mom was writing the books and using me as the front to sell them because it was a commodity. Or like, we heard everything. And I taught at some young writers conferences and an adult writers conference when I was 15, 16, 17-ish. And it was always really interesting because at that time, the gulf between self-publishing and traditional publishing was completely different than it is now. And there was a lot more, I think, stigma against self-published authors. And so, I would always get the side eyes when I'd walk into a room full of much older, traditionally published authors, and they would like, who's the kid? Well, I'm an author. No. So I think there's a lot of different, like, wherever you start, I feel like there's gonna be some of that I don't fit in, like I'm different.
I was such an uncomfortable 15-year-old. I can't even imagine.
Well, I was too. I just got very good at hiding it. Yeah. And I mean, one of the imposter syndrome things that I've worked through since coming into this space as kind of coming back to publishing after a long break was, you know, that kind of voice in the back of my head that said, you were just a commodity. Can you even write a book and play in a big pond, you know? Like that was a huge imposter syndrome moment for me, where I wasn't sure I could write an epic fantasy at an adult level, and I wasn't sure that it would be any good, because maybe I was just a 14-year-old who wrote books and that was cool, you know? So I think Bloodstones was a huge step up to that point, but I think Bloodstones did so much for me, and not just the writing of the book, but the community of people. I mean, as you well know, there are so many incredibly wonderful, supportive people in this community, and the other authors that just took me under their wings and immediately believed in the stories that I had to tell. I mean, that made a huge difference in my confidence level.
And the community is huge. It's huge. So, and for me, it was Radar and Box, but going back, this was the days when blogs were it. I mean, BookTube didn't exist. And I mean, I started hanging around Radar Unboxed, I think in 2008. And you know, when I was a young enough writer that I was even like afraid to young. I wasn't young, but I was new enough writer. Yeah. Even nervous about commenting on the blog. I mean, but that was what got me those early steps, was just commenting on people's writing essays and having them respond to me and saying, "Oh, you make a good point here," or something. And I'm like, "Oh, I made a good point," you know, like just like,
wow, thanks.
And, you know, and one thing led to another, and I got asked to do a guest post, and then I turned into a regular contributor and then an editor. And so I mean, it's a journey for everybody, like you said, and it's tough. I mean, I was a 43-year-old man, a very successful businessman. Prior to that, we had just sold our company, and I just, you know, still had to go through the imposter part of it, you know. And I could talk all the live long day about wholesale lumber, but you wouldn't get me to talk about writing or to tell people what my book was about. I just couldn't do it.
That's scary, no matter. Selling your own book, it's really funny, because when I'm getting better, but my regulars on the channel and my friends that are always in the chat always have to remind me, Tori, you have a book. You need to promote your book. Oh yeah, thanks. Yeah. It's always, I always appreciate that they remind me that I should probably, you know, give a sales pitch when I'm out. It's
funny because, like, even on Twitter, in our little community on Twitter, I see some of the reviewers and stuff like asking for recommendations, and they're like, always have to put no self-promotion, and I'm like, I can't even believe that, but I swear to God, they must be putting it there for a reason. I can't even imagine that being my first impulse. What about my book? You know, like,
But,
they all do it. So obviously it becomes a mindset. And I know there's a hopeful time when you hope everybody will try your book too. There's a period in life, but you know, and then you kind of get beyond that and you go, for me, I got a weird thing. I don't like sharing snippets. People always like, well, share a snippet, blah, blah, blah. And I don't mind when other people do it. I just don't like to do it myself. I feel like, well, this is out of context. This is going to look stupid. And it's, so I just don't do that. And we get people on Radar and Box all the time, guest authors and stuff, and they want to share parts of their book and their essays about writing. And we're always like, no, don't do that. This isn't the place for that. You're talking to other writers. You're not talking to readers or trying to sell your book. You're talking to other writers, and other writers are important. They're an important part of your life as a writer. You know, and it'll be huge for you to gain some friendships and stuff out of this, or you have other writers supporting you. But that's not why you're here. You're not here to promote yourself. So that's the mindset I came from, was all those years of discouraging that among people in Radar and Box. And so when I see those kind of memes going around where it's like, share this, and I'm like, I don't do that. But you know, and I don't, like I said, I don't mind when other people do it. It's just kind of it, and I'm not a very good promoter of my own work, but I'm like you, it's kind of an afterthought.
Yeah. Well, and I think especially where you know, you and I are kind of straddling the fence a little bit, where you're a reviewer, editor, and a blogger, and I'm a YouTube creator and a reviewer, where I think sometimes it's hard to remember that you can wear both hats, because you stick your, you know, like for me, content creator, reviewer hat on. Oh yeah, I have a book. You know, and I also think there's something I think really important to the heart of the community that we're in, where it is, promote your own books, but also I love if I see somebody asking for a recommendation and I have a friend and I know that their book would be the perfect fit. I get so excited to be like, oh, you got to check out this book by this author. It's exactly what you're looking for. And that's always such a fun, I think that's the content creator side of us, maybe, that's like, we love connecting the right story with the right person.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's a good feeling.
And just like when I read something I really love, like Angela's book I just finished. It's Fortune's Fool, by the way. I said Fool's Fortune. I just loved that book. So I just want to, like, everybody, if you like this kind of story, you love this.
Read it.
Yeah. So, I mean, and like you said, it's just, you want to, I love Philip Chase's books. I pro about him every chance I get. You know, it's just fun. P.L. Stewart, another one. But and he's out there shining the light on so many people.
Kindest person.
Oh my God, he's incredible.
Yeah, he's wonderful.
Yeah. So it's such a cool community in that respect, and it's just I feel fortunate that I stumbled across. Actually, I stumbled across, I think, Murphy Napier first. And one thing, you know how it goes. One thing,
she's awesome.
And she led me to, you know, Daniel Green and others. And then you just all of a sudden start, you know, the good old algorithm.
It's a rabbit hole.
It starts pumping them to you. And next thing you know, and then, you know, like my thought about YouTube for a decade was, God forbid, never put a comment on YouTube. Be crucified. You know, you have 1,000 people telling you how stupid you are. and BookTube is like not that. It's almost like Radar and Box.
Very, very small amount of that. Yeah.
So I was pleasantly surprised to find that was the case. And once I started commenting on some of you guys' channels, it just, I mean, I'm here because of kind people like you and like Philip and others have all embraced me and brought me in. And I don't think I'll ever do a YouTube channel, but it's just a great community to be a part of.
Yeah. Well, we love having you on. So you can just kind of channel hop.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it was interesting with the YouTube community, because I kind of expected that too. And I started in a very different niche of BookTube when I was first starting my channel. But I'm so grateful to have met the tribe of people that I'm in now. And it's such a, you know, you talk about people bringing you in and embracing. And I think that's such a pay it forward thing in this community, because like, I love that I have a platform that allows me to connect readers and authors, and that allows me to gush about my favorite books, and, you know, that people care about what I have to say about those books. And as somebody who grew up as the nerd, and I think a lot of us can relate to that. Like, you know, when I was very young, being a nerd wasn't cool. Like, it's kind of cool now. It was not cool when I was very young. And so I always joke that I am in my 30s, and I now have a giant crowd of friends who are just as nerdy as I am, and I'm having the best time.
Yeah,
It's great.
It's funny, even within Radar and Box, because we're not really a fantasy community. I'm the nerd at Radar and Box. I mean, but there are others of us, and thank God we have Juliet Morelli.
Oh,
and so
she was such a delight to talk to.
Yeah.
Loved
was
that.
A blast when she was on your channel, and she's fantastic. I've had the opportunity to meet her and spend some time with her. She came to the U.S. to the Radar and Box conference in 2018, I think.
Okay.
But she was there for a week, and we got to spend some time together. And
cool.
Man, she's a druid. How cool is that?
Oh yeah.
But it's just having people like that, like you said, embrace you and bring you in, and it's everything. I don't know. And people think of writing as being so solitary, and part of it is.
Yeah.
But we all. My Kathy Yardley, who I mentioned earlier, one day said to me, "We all write alone, but none of us can succeed alone."
Mm-hmm. Very true.
I wrote it down somewhere. It's on my desk somewhere. But we got it. We just can't do it alone.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's such a beautiful example how so many people from so many different perspectives, backgrounds, etc., have this passionate common ground where we all love good storytelling.
Yeah.
And it's such a great example of unity in our world right now that I think that's incredibly powerful and beneficial. And I wish that there was more pockets of that for people to take advantage of.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. And I think we're all, and we're all, part of what we all love about it is that empathy that reading engenders, that's kind of the glue that binds so many writers together, is that we all get it. We've all been there. We're all we've been talking through this whole conversation about some of those early struggles.
Yeah.
And we all get it. And I realized that, and the whole pay it forward thing, when I was first meeting people that I considered very successful authors, everybody remembers like yesterday, and everybody struggles still. I mean, we all have our doubts, and we all have our days, and we all wish we could have done something differently, or just so it's empathy, and is just, I think, and storytelling is such a way to engender more empathy. I mean, the world needs more stories more than anything else.
Amen. Yeah.
I've actually redirected a lot of my charitable giving over the years to literacy, and in my hometown, there's a literacy group called ROC. It's Read and Write Kalamazoo.
Oh, cool.
And, they have a center, for a youth center, that's always supervised, and where kids can just come together and they can either go and read, or they can game together, they can write. They have writing sprints, and
that's awesome.
All this stuff going on. And I'm just like, more of this, please.
Yeah.
It's so community based, and all these people are volunteering, and it's a supervised space, and it's in kind of an underprivileged part of town, but it's a safe spot. And and it's just, I keep hearing, and they send me all these newsletters, and these kids are doing these amazing things and writing these great essays and getting them published, and my God,
awesome.
Just it makes my heart so happy. So more of that. I mean, that's what the world needs,
Yeah, agree, 100%. Yeah, it's very cool. I wish we could copy paste that in every every town.
And maybe we can. I mean, who's to say we can't? And I think, if I hear of other places like that, and if somebody knows of something like that, let me in on it. I want to help out if I can. So
yeah, absolutely. Well, Vaughn, I want to thank you so much for generously spending your time on the channel this evening.
Time has flown by. I can't believe
I know.
class.
This one of my other favorite parts of what I do is just like it's like talking to old friends all the time. You're like, oh man, it's awesome.
I already feel like I've known you forever.
I mean, I'm trying to remember the first time we corresponded was quite a while ago, because we've just kind of gone back and forth quite a bit.
I think I was in a couple of the chats, in a couple of people's chats while you were on panels and stuff. And and we just started communicating via Twitter after that, I think, maybe. But I don't know. Yeah,
it's been a while. Yeah. What is time?
Yeah. Exactly.
And I want to remind everybody, thank you everyone in the chat for joining us. And if you're watching the replay, please make sure you go down in the description box and click Vaughn's link to his website. I'm assuming there's a link to Writers Unboxed on your website.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. And I would highly recommend you guys to check out Vaughn's series and also to check out Writers Unboxed, because I didn't know that existed until I met Vaughn, and what a wealth of amazing just information and articles and encouragement.
It's searchable too. Like if you're writing a synopsis, there's 25 great essays, even step-by-step stuff on how to write a synopsis from top.
I need that.
That's an example. That's one of the things I've searched. So anyway, stuff like that. It's searchable. The whole Writer Unboxed data bank. It goes back to 06, I think. So
okay, awesome. Yeah, I'm one of those authors where I would rather write a 150,000 word book than the synopsis of that 150,000 word book.
I'm with you.
So, Vaughn, thank you again so much for joining us. Thank you, chat. You guys are awesome. Have a wonderful evening, morning, or afternoon. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.